Good morning, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Elevenses from London here. I'm Kevin Williams of Survival Skills Rider Training, and for the next 30 minutes I'll be bringing you some topical news, controversial views, and some biking tips. Before I go on with the show, just a couple of announcements. Now, if you want to tune in tomorrow at 11, I'm running a special, and this will be my Science of Being Seen presentation. It's the one I deliver for Kent Fire and Rescue Service. It's the original Science of Being Seen presentation. I've been delivering it since 2012. The team down in Kent, we won an International Road Safety Award for Biker Down. The presentation has gone out in a simplified form to other fire and rescue services. It's also delivered by the military and a few other organisations too who deliver the Biker Down course. So if you want to see the original version, which has been constantly updated with new information over the last 8 years, I had time to do precisely one in 2020 before we locked down. Then tune in tomorrow, same place and same time, 11 o'clock Saturday. That'll also, of course, go out on my YouTube channel later. And the other announcement is be open with your diary and put this time and date in it, Monday, 11 a.m. I'm very much hoping to have recorded an interview with Dr. Chris Hurren by then, and to be able to run it on that show. We're scheduled to do that this afternoon, so hopefully we'll get that in the can. And Chris will be talking about his work with protective motorcycle clothing, and in particular his testing regime and how it differs from that used by the current CE approval system, and the Moto Cap system of ratings that he has been instrumental in producing down under. So that's Monday's show at 11. So two things there to remember. Science are being seen Saturday, that's tomorrow at 11, and then on Monday a special interview with Dr. Chris Hurren at 11 on the regular Elevenses show. So okay, rapidly then on with the show. What have we got to talk about today? Well, I've got some stories coming up. We've got an armchair adventure festival to tell you about, Honda with wings, electric Kawasaki Ninja, Oxfordshire County Council and how they have retracted at least some of the anti-motorcycle claims in their engagement document, and we'll be looking at Norton as well, who looks set for a big cash injection after the purchase last week. And last but not least, we'll be looking at bike cleaners as well, and what you can use to get your bike all nice and shiny. So stay tuned to the end if you can, and if you can't, don't forget you can catch up here on Facebook or over on my YouTube channel. Okay. Don't forget, if you have anything to say, pop it into the comment stream and I will get back to it at the end of the show when I've gone off air. If you've got any suggestions for future shows, then drop those in as well. Always happy to hear what you have to say. So, okay. Right, so first story then in the news. Someone on the More Bikes website clearly has far too much time on their hands, because they're always looking at what's being registered as a new patent for a motorcycle. And what they've just discovered is a new Honda patent. And this time it's for a rear spoiler. Now, if you can imagine a sort of fairly standard looking motorcycle, sort of CBR 1000, the naked version, or something like even an older Hornet. Imagine a rear wing, a spoiler if you were, sitting where the passenger would do normally, projecting up above where the seat would be. Well, that's where it is. So in terms of practicality, it's probably scores about 1 in 5 for a conventional motorcycle. So what's it for? Well, spoilers are generally there to smooth out airflow, and the intention for that is normally to reduce turbulence and drag. Now, one of the problems with riding a motorcycle is that the bike itself creates quite a lot of drag through the air because of its shape. It's about as aerodynamic as a brick, the average motorbike. And there is always a drag on the back of the rider, which at high speed gets tiring. So possibly it's something to do with that. The other reasons that we normally want to reduce drag are to either increase top speed, which is why you have a design like the Hayabusa, which is smoothed over all round and basically teardrop shaped with the rider in place, or it's to reduce fuel consumption. Now, the fuel consumption issue is never often a consideration for motorcycle designers, and quite frankly, neither of those make an awful lot of sense, given that the device is shown on the 4-cylinder naked style machine. So lack of a fairing is obviously a hindrance to top speed and fuel consumption. Okay, anything else it can do? Well, it can increase downforce. If you've been watching MotoGP, you'll have noticed that various bikes have sprouted wings on the fairing, which are designed to increase the push down on the front tire, give it more grip. But there's a problem with that, in as much as it also creates extra drag. You don't get that downward force for nothing. So you have a balance between the drag and the downforce from the wings at the front of the bike. If there's a spoiler on the rear seat, maybe that's designed to push down on the rear tire and increase grip under acceleration. But again, the trade-off will be increased drag at higher speeds. So it seems unlikely that it will appear on a road bike. It just doesn't seem to have an awful lot of function other than styling. It may appear on a race bike at some point, but I would imagine it'll be, for a road bike, it'll be like the hump on bike leathers. It will be a styling exercise and more or less completely pointless. Okay, so missing your biking fix? Well, maybe the Armchair Adventure Festival is for you then. It's running from today, Friday the 24th, through till Saturday the 26th of April. The organisers say to read the press release. We will be bringing the most inspiring and interesting adventure talks from around the world straight to your armchair, with talks from top adventurers, panel discussions and workshops on all kinds of adventurous topics. Some of the most exciting motorcycle adventure films out there. It will be an event to remember. Okay, the event's actually free, but you do have to sign up in advance. And the organisers are also asking for a voluntary donation to the NHS Charities Together Fund to help fight the COVID-19 virus. So if you're interested in that, the activities kick off at 7 p.m. this evening, and they'll end with one of those travel films on Sunday evening. So do a Google on that. It's called the Armchair Adventure Festival. You'll find it easily enough. Have a look for that. Okay, what else? Well, in emission standards, we know that the internal combustion engine has been put under pressure, and more standards, countries rather, have ramped up their emission standards right across the world. And India, in fact, which is the world's largest motorcycle market, is actually phasing out small petrol-engined motorcycles completely by 2025, and that's going to challenge all motorcycle manufacturers to adapt their model ranges, whether we like it or not. And although full details are still under wraps, the news is that Kawasaki are the latest manufacturer to be turning to electric power. And what's been seen around and what they've actually released is a limited amount of detail about an electric motorcycle under test, which is based on the Ninja 400. The twin-cylinder engine has been removed and electric motor and battery has been put in place. Now, interestingly, Kawasaki say that this is actually married to a 4-speed gearbox. Now, if you know anything about the Zeros, I test rode a couple of those last year and I was very impressed with them. There's no gearbox. You simply twist the throttle and go. But there is a problem with that direct drive to the rear wheel, and that's as the engine electric motor speed increases, you basically come back to the reason for having a gearbox in the first place. You run out of revs in the engine before you run out of potential push from that motor, and that's why gearboxes were invented 100 plus years ago. It was to increase the speed that the engine's limited ability to rev could work over. Now, interestingly, the TT0 motorcycles also discovered this problem, and they found that they needed to move to conventional gearboxes to get the best out of their electric motors. So I'm guessing that this probably means that Kawasaki are using a small electric motor, probably then quite a light one, and that the gearbox is necessary to keep the revs down as the speed climbs. Something else on that bike is a thumb-activated rear brake, which is basically the energy recovery system. It's regenerative braking. Now, it very much seems unlikely that they'll put that into a production version. It seems almost certain that would be controlled simply by shutting the throttle, but I guess the system allows them to apply that in a sort of quick and dirty way to an existing chassis and brake setup. For the same reason, I suspect that that bike has the conventional chain drive that you'd find on the 400 Ninja. So I'm guessing that both features possibly wouldn't make it through to a final production model. Anyway, so okay, you're watching Elevenses live with Kevin Williams of Survival Skills. Still to come, we are going to be looking at the Oxfordshire County Council motorcycle debacle, Norton, and how that story is rolling on, and then we'll finish off with bike cleaners. So, okay, moving on to the Oxfordshire County Council story. Now, this is quite a complex one. I meant to cover this actually earlier in the week, but basically ran out of time. they've been forced to change their approach because the the amount of outrage from the biking community. The document was published as part of a pre-consultation engagement activity, and some of the statements were pretty outrageous. They called motorcyclists a danger to themselves. They claimed that motorcyclists made substantial contributions to noise pollution, and they basically attracted the ire not only of individual motorcyclists but also the rider groups like the MAG and the BMF. Now it seems that OCC have now published an updated version of the document with most of the offending content removed. And Councillor Yvonne Constance, who is the Cabinet Minister for the Environment for Oxford County Council, said of the document, I'm sorry that MAG feel that it is biased in its outlook and this was not the intention, but we accept it was construed this way. Now, it's not really much of an apology, is it? It's actually kind of, it's basically not apologising at all. Anyway, what happened was that MAG met last week with Oxfordshire County Council. I mentioned the original document last Sunday, and the MAG then released a press release which claimed to expose blatant anti-motorcycling bias and to have discovered jaw-droppingly inappropriate accusations against bikers. Now, okay, let's row down on those a little bit. The document was published publicly, so I doubt it took very much discovery, so it's not much of an expose, really, is it? Anyway, let's not be picky. They did what was needed to do. They brought it to wider attention, so let's give MAG credit for that. I mentioned the other day that the document contained some very clumsy wording and that many of the statements were vague and open to interpretation and therefore misinterpretation, and also questioned whether some of it was factually incorrect. Ian Much, the MAG president, also described the document as amateurish, and MAG's director, Ian Crutchlow, said, I've seen some biased papers on motorcycling before, but this one is right out there. So what happened was they then went and had a meeting with the county council, and the meeting was facilitated by a chap called John Broad, who is also a councillor for Cherwell District Council. He happens to be a MAG member, so he kind of sits between the two groups. And MAG were able to present their own Pathways for Progress document, which lays out what MAG calls a sensible and balanced view of motorcycling and how the mode can be better integrated into transport policy. So the overall goal here is to tone down what the county council have been saying, and that does seem to have been achieved. One other point, if you are going to respond to this, and it's something I noted the other day, is that the website does say that if an inappropriate or offensive language is used, the submissions will not be considered acceptable. And you also point out that strangely, it was on the motorcycle document that this was the only one of those engagement documents to actually have that statement. So that rather implies that the authors knew pretty much what response they would get from motorcyclists. Anyway, take a look, make your own response, but keep it polite. Right, okay, where are we now? Well, you're watching Elevenses. Now, don't forget, you can still get hold of my paperback books. If you can't ride, you can at least read and learn something about better biking. They're available to order from my publisher's site, so do put an order in. Every order you do put in helps me keep eating for the foreseeable future. We'll be looking at cleaning the bike in just a moment, but first of all, over to the latest from Norton. Now, this story just rolls and rolls, doesn't it? Financial Times had a story yesterday to the effect that TVS Motor, who bought Norton, have big plans for the brand under the new owners. They're promising a multi-million pound injection of cash. And what they aim to do, it says, is double the workforce and launch new products in what they call a global drive to revive sales to restore the brand to its former glory. TVS's joint managing director, Sudarshan Venu, said that the Norton brand has tremendous potential. And what they plan to do is integrate new technology into future bikes to widen their appeal. I presume they're talking about things like, well, in fact, the statement says they're talking about things like assisted riding, safety systems, and advanced electronics. So basically, it'll move Norton up there with all the other premium brands. And the premium brand market is where they are hinting that Norton is likely to be placed. Norton, they say, have always stood for the highest end of motorcycles, as many of these features are important for taking the brand into the future. Norton focuses on a customer group that is in the super premium category. Okay, so you can strip the fancy language out of that and you can see pretty quickly that Norton is not likely to be producing motorcycles in the same price range as the new Royal Enfield 650 Twin. A former Harley-Davidson executive has been appointed interim chief executive, a chap called John Russell, and he plans to name a management team in due course. The statement continues by saying that they'll restart production at Donington Park initially, and they will seek to fulfill undelivered customer orders, which is good news for those people who put in money and have been waiting for bikes sometimes for years. And then they hope within 6 months, this is a plan to move to a bigger factory nearby where they will up their capacity to make 2,000 bikes a year. So pretty impressive plans for Norton there. Okay, don't forget, you can join me here on Elevenses every Monday, Wednesday, Friday and Sunday at 11 a.m. BST. And if you miss the live show, you can either catch up here on Facebook or you can head over to my YouTube channel, which is Survival Skills UK. And as I said before, don't forget that all-important UK, or you'll find someone teaching you how to use camping equipment or something similar. All right, okay. On to the last item for the day. I've been talking over the previous weeks about what we can do with our bikes while we're locked down, and we've been talking in terms of things like maintaining the battery. Well, I've started by talking about bike cleaning, and I'm going to carry on with that, but just a quick update on last week's item, which was about tyre care. Now, I questioned whether the advice to lower tyre pressure is actually a good one, and I got a response from a chap called Richard Bentham, who helpfully chipped in to tell me that when cars which are delivered to showrooms and are actually standing waiting to be passed on to customers, the usual practice there is to overinflate the tyres. For storage. They actually pump them up from about 36 to about 50 psi, and then what they do, of course, is lower them back to the recommended pressure as part of the pre-delivery inspection. So that tends to support what I was saying last week, that reducing tyre pressures by half probably isn't a great idea, and absolutely definitely not if your bike is sat on the ground. Yes, if you can get both wheels off the ground, then drop the pressures perhaps a little bit. If you're if you've got tyres on the ground, don't underinflate them. That's obviously not a great idea. The other explanation that came in was that was about standing a bike on a piece of old carpet. Again, the theory there is it will help protect the tyres, the molecular structure of the rubber from damage from the cold. Now, I'm still not entirely convinced by that. Whilst it is a fact that the molecular structure of the compounds in your tyres can be damaged by extreme cold, which is why that tyres aren't stored out in the open, but indoors in a warehouse. The surface that you're standing on will tend to match the air temperature. Not absolutely, but if the air gets cold, the ground gets cold too. Think about the winter. If you get a frosty air, you will get frost on the ground. The actual dynamics of that are a little bit more complicated, but basically, if you put the tyre on a piece of carpet and it's parked outside and it's icy, the carpet will be the same temperature as the air, pretty much. So I'm not convinced that will do a great great deal of good for your tyre, hot or cold. Indoors, well, it can't do any harm, but I'm not convinced about the claims for that outdoors. So, okay, where were we on bike cleaning? Well, you remember that we'd got all the muck off the back of the bike, the chain fling, as it were, because that's the first and most important thing to remove. You need a proper degreaser for that. If you don't get that off, you will simply smear it around the rest of the bike. So we're going to move on to tackling the paintwork and the plastic. And the question I specifically want to answer is, what should we wash it with? Now, any cleaner has to contain two agents. I remember this very well from my chemistry courses at A level. You need a degreaser, which is a substance which breaks apart the bonds in that greasy mess. So if you've got a blob of grease, the degreaser gets in there, breaks it down into smaller chunks, and those smaller chunks are eventually reduced to sort of tiny, almost molecular size. Okay, and then you need something called a surfactant. Now, a surfactant does something very different. What it does is it actually lifts this mess of contaminated, greasy water. It enables it to lift away from the surface and be dispersed. So then you can come in there with fresh water, throw it over the bike, and all the muck will disappear. So, what do you know that contains a degreaser and a surfactant? Well, Fairy Liquid. Other brands are available, but Fairy Liquid does the job. It's precisely what it's designed to do. Now, go onto the internet or look at any manufacturers of expensive motorcycle cleaning kit and their websites and see what they say. And they'll say, don't use Fairy Liquid or washing up liquid generally because it contains salt and that will rust the vehicle. Well, again, let's just do some logical thinking through that. Now, first thing is to say that washing up liquid does contain salt of a salt, if you'll pardon the pun. And apparently what that's used for mostly is to thicken the detergent, to actually make it that sort of gloopy consistency other than just runny water. However, think about what you do with your bike in the winter. You're likely to be riding over roads which have been treated with salt. Now, if you put a capful of Fairy Liquid into a bucket and mix it up, how much salt are you actually putting on your bike? How does that compare with the salty spray that's been thrown over the machine on your ride? Well, I would, without actually getting a chemistry set out and measuring it, I would imagine that the salt spray contains far more salt than your Fairy Liquid solution. So I'm not convinced that if you're washing your bike down in the winter that you're going to do more harm with Fairy Liquid than less if you don't wash it. If you rinse it all off again, then the amount of salt remaining on the bike is going to be negligible, certainly far less than is in that salty crap which is all over your bike if you don't clean it. Now, here's something else to consider. Many of the expensive proprietary brands of bike cleaner actually contain much the same mix of chemicals as the washing up liquid. Chemicals, however they're marketed. And the bike cleaners have to contain the same two types of chemical. Degreasers to break up the oily deposits, and surfactants to ensure that those oily deposits are flushed away with water when you rinse the bike. So they basically do the same job. Now, the only problem is that the alkaline chemicals, which these things tend to consist of, also strip wax. Wax is basically a kind of oil. A little bit more complicated than that, but in essence, if you wash your bike with Fairy Liquid, you will strip the wax treatment on the outside of your paintwork away. So what seems possible is that the bike-specific cleaners, car-specific cleaners, probably no better and no worse than Fairy at lifting the crud. But what they may help to do is replace that waxy coating, whereas the Fairy clearly doesn't. After all, it's designed to use on plates. It's not designed for washing motorcycles. There's one other little issue. Washing up liquids also tend to leave a streaky finish as the bike dries. Now, those streaks are tiny solid particles, and if you remove the wax and then you deposit a load of tiny little solid particles all over the bare metal, and then you try to polish out those streaks, what you're basically doing is you're rubbing a ready-made abrasive over your paint, and that's likely to dull the finish. Now, interestingly, in my internet search, I found several claims that card detailers actually do use fairy liquid, and they do it specifically to strip away that old wax coating, because then they can get down to the paintwork. But what they're going to do then is actually treat the paintwork to a refinish. Basically, you're going to use a very careful set of treatments which polish up that metal. They take away the outside coat, they take away the outside coat of that paint to bring back that just new shine, and before they seal the whole thing up with a wax layer again. So high quality wax treatment goes over the top of a beautifully polished paint, and you're back to a sort of as new finish on your car. But that's interesting that they can use fairy liquid to do that. Now, obviously, there are a lot of cleaning products specifically designed for cars and for motorcycles, and they vary from very similar prices to a bottle of fairy liquid right up to eye-wateringly expensive. Now, ask yourself, what are you using your bike for? If you are using a bike on a fairly rare occasions, if you're only taking it out in good weather, if it spends most of its time being mollycoddled in a garage, and particularly if it's a high-end model, then I would recommend that you stick with a decent bike cleaner. If you're not cleaning it very often, it's not going to cost you much, is it? The one-off cost isn't going to be enormous. If, on the other hand, you're using that bike day in, day out, and it's just a workhorse, well, you're probably cleaning it on a fairly regular basis. Do you actually need to stick to these special products? Well, I don't think you do. I'm just going to share you another picture. Just bear with me while I click on the relevant bit. Here we have a photograph of one of the old training bikes. You probably recognize that if you've done your bike training in recent years. Nice little CG125. Now, we used to clean these on a daily basis when the weather was cruddy, because we wanted to get that salt off the bike. What we were intending to do was remove that salt and stop them rusting, basically. And what we did was we used washing up liquid and a hose down routine. And that bike was several years old when that photo was taken. And as you can see, with a bit of Mr. Sheen polish, they got that once a week just to sort of restore the polish coating. They actually didn't look too bad when we sold them on at all. I don't think so. Okay. You basically pay your money and you take your choice on this. You decide whether your bike is worth spending lots of money on proprietary cleaners, or whether you can get away with something a little bit more economical. Up to you. You know what the risks are now, I hope, and you know what the benefits are. So next week, buckets of water, hose or jet wash. I'll cover the pros and cons of those. Right, okay, so time's just about up for today. I'll leave you with a reminder that we'll be running Science Being Seen tomorrow at Saturday 11 o'clock in the morning, and then on Monday we'll be following up our CE series and hopefully an interview with Chris Hurren to talk about his motor cap standard. In the meantime, don't forget to check out my regular posts on Facebook, the written posts, and for now, thanks for watching, and hopefully we'll catch you soon with when we are next on. It's I forgot what the day of the week it is. Yeah, okay, Sunday is our next Elevenses show, isn't it? So hopefully see you on Sunday. Right, bye for now.